Please, don't tell him I said anything. You don't know what he does when I talk back. Those were the words that stopped Jackson Hayes, cold words, whispered by a girl who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her voice barely holding together behind the counter of a roadside diner that smelled like burnt coffee and old grease. He had heard a lot of things in 50 years of living hard. But something about the way she said it, the way her eyes cut to the kitchen door, like she was calculating how fast she could run, made him set down his mug and really look at her for the first time. Before we go any further, if stories like this one hit you somewhere real, somewhere you recognize, subscribe to this channel and follow Emily's story all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Jackson Iron Wolf Hayes had been writing since before Emily Carter was born. He knew what it felt like to be underestimated. He knew what it felt like to walk into a room and watch people decide, based purely on the leather on his back and the gray in his beard, that he was dangerous. He had made peace with that a long time ago. The patch on his vest meant something to the people who understood it, and to the people who didn't, well, their opinion wasn't something he'd ever lost sleep over. He had stopped at the diner because his tank needed filling and his back needed a break. The ride from Kingman had been long, the kind of long that settled into your bones and made you feel every year you'd ever lived. He was 51 years old. He didn't bounce back the way he used to. He pulled into the gravel lot, killed the engine, and sat for a moment just listening to the silence that rolled out. After the rumble, died that particular desert quiet that felt almost physical, like something pressing against your eardrums. The diner was called Sunrise Family Restaurant, which Jackson thought was the kind of name chosen by someone who had never actually been awake at sunrise. The sign had a faded painting of a sun that looked more like a cracked egg yolk. One of the letters in family was burned out on the neon, so it read Smiley. He noticed these things not because they mattered, but because noticing things was a habit that had kept him alive through situations considerably serious than a roadside lunch stop. He pushed through the door and took a booth near the window. There were maybe 8 other customers in the place, a couple of truckers, an older pair who looked like they might be on a road trip, a young mother trying to get a toddler to eat something from a high chair. The kind of ordinary afternoon crowd that existed in every roadside diner in America. Nothing that asked for a second look. He picked up the laminated menu and was scanning it without particular enthusiasm when he heard it. Not loud. That was the thing. It wasn't a shout or a crash or any of the sounds you'd expect to signal something wrong. It was quiet, barely above a whisper, coming from just behind the counter, near the edge of the pass-through window to the kitchen. I know, I'm sorry. I'll fix it. Just please don't. I said I'm sorry. Jackson's lowered the menu without thinking about it. A young woman was standing at the counter with her back half turned toward the dining room. Blonde hair pulled into a ponytail that had come loose at the sides. A pale blue uniform that was one size too big, like it had been handed down from someone else. She had her shirt pulled in tight around herself, in a way that wasn't about cold air. She was holding a notepad against her chest with both hands, fingers white at the knuckles, and she was talking or being talked to through the pass-through window by a voice that Jackson couldn't fully hear from where he sat. He could hear enough. The tone came through even if the words didn't. Low, even, deliberate. The kind of voice that didn't need to get loud because it had already established that loud wasn't necessary. Jackson had heard that voice before. Not from this man, from other men. Men who understood that control didn't require volume. The young woman nodded 3 times fast. Yes. Yes, even though nobody could see her nodding. She did it anyway, like a reflex. Then she straightened up, pushed a strand of hair back behind her ear with one slightly trembling hand, and turned around to face the dining room. For half a second, she thought she was composed. She had the expression right. The small professional smile, the weird doing fine posture, but her eyes were wet. Not spilled over, not crying, but the kind of wet that meant she was working very, very hard to hold it together, and the effort was visible. She looked directly at Jackson because he was the only person in her section who hadn't been served yet. He watched her take a breath, tighten the smile, and walk toward him. "Hi there," she said. Her voice was steady. He gave her credit for that. "What can I get started for you today?" Jackson looked at her for a moment, not in a way that was supposed to make her uncomfortable, but in the way he looked at everything when he was trying to understand it. Quietly, "What's your name?" he said. She blinked. That wasn't the expected response. "Emily." "Emily." He nodded. "I'll take coffee and whatever the soup is." But first he paused. "You doing all right?" And there it was. The question cracked something in her face that the deep breath and the forced smile had been holding shut. It was fast 2 seconds, maybe 3, and then she pulled it back. But those 2 seconds were real. Her chin dipped, her jaw tightened. Her eyes cut briefly toward the kitchen and then back to him. "I'm fine," she said. "Thank you." She wrote down the order and walked away without giving him a chance to say anything else. Jackson drank his coffee slowly. He wasn't in a hurry. He watched. He had always been better at watching than at talking, which his brothers in the club would have confirmed with a laugh. He could sit at a table for 3 hours, and people would forget he was there. That wasn't an accident. It was a skill he'd developed over decades of situations that required you to understand what was happening in a room before you committed to any particular response. What was happening in this room was not subtle. Emily moved through her section efficiently. She was good at her job, that much was clear. She remembered orders. She anticipated refills. She handled the toddler at table 4 with a kind of easy warmth that was obviously genuine. She had a real smile and a hollow smile, and he could already tell the difference between them. The real one came out for the toddler and for the road trip couple who wanted recommendations for nearby gas stations. The hollow one came out every time the kitchen door swung open. There was another waitress working the back section, older, heavyset, with graying red hair and the particular efficient exhaustion of someone who had been doing this job for 20 years. Her name tag said Donna. Jackson watched Donna too. He noticed that Donna also tracked the kitchen door. He noticed that Donna's posture changed when she got close to the pass-through window. She didn't have Emily's youth or Emily's forced brightness. What she had instead was a kind of practiced invisibility. She had learned how to move through a room without drawing attention, and she wore that skill like a second skin. The kitchen door opened. Jackson didn't visibly react. He just watched. The man who came out was in his mid-40s, compact and solid with close-cropped hair and the confident stride of someone who owned a room even when he didn't. He was wearing a manager's shirt, the kind of polo that restaurants gave to shift supervisors, dark-colored with the diner's logo embroidered on the chest. He had a clipboard. He was scanning the dining room the way someone scans a space they are responsible for, which could have looked like professionalism and instead looked like surveillance. Travis Miller. Jackson didn't know his name yet. He would learn it. But in this first moment, he was just the man from the kitchen, and what Jackson clocked in the first 10 seconds of watching him cross the dining room was this. He moved differently around Emily than he moved around Donna. Around Donna, he was dismissive, barely registered her presence. Around Emily, there was something else. An attention that wasn't friendly. The kind of attention that wants something to complain about. He stopped behind Emily at table 6, where she was taking an order from the truckers. Emily knew immediately that he was there. Jackson saw it in the way her shoulders changed, the almost imperceptible tightening, like a small animal that has just registered a predator entering its perimeter. She finished writing the order. She smiled at the truckers. She said, "I'll get that right out for you." She was completely professional. She turned, and Travis was right there, 4 inches behind her. "Too close. You're behind on table 9, he said. Not loud. Conversational. "I'll get to them right now," Emily said. "You should have gotten to them 5 minutes ago. I was with these customers. I don't need you to explain your priorities to me. I need you to manage your section." Emily nodded. "Yes, sir. And your uniform is a mess." Her uniform was fine. Jackson could see it from across the room. Emily looked down at herself briefly, a flash of something that might have been confusion, Might have been the beginning of an argument, and then it was gone. Yes, sir, she said again. Travis held his position for exactly 1 beat too long before stepping aside. It was a small thing, the length of that beat. But Jackson understood the math of it. That 1 extra second was the whole point. It wasn't about the uniform, and it wasn't about Table 9. It was about reminding Emily publicly, in front of customers, in front of her coworkers, that she was subject to his assessment at any moment, and his assessment was that she was inadequate. Travis walked away. Emily walked toward Table 9. Her back was straight. Her expression was correct. She did not look at Jackson. He looked at her. He ordered a piece of pie he didn't particularly want and settled in. The lunch rush came and went. Jackson ordered more coffee. The road trip couple left. The truckers left. The young mother managed to get the toddler into a stroller and navigated her way out through the narrow space between tables with the focused determination of someone who had done harder things than this. The diner quieted. Jackson was on his third cup of coffee and considering the question of whether this was any of his business, a question he genuinely wrestled with because he had strong opinions about when interference helped and when it made things worse when Donna came by with the pot. "You want a warm-up, hon?" she said. "Sure." He held out his mug. "You been working here long?" Donna looked at him. A beat of assessment. Who is this man and what does he want? And then she poured. "Long enough." "Manager always like that?" Another beat. "Longer. Don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Jackson said, not unkindly. Donna set the coffee pot down on the table instead of moving on. Something shifted in her face. "Customers don't usually notice," she said. Her voice was quiet. "I notice things." "He's not always," she stopped. Started again. "He's hard to work for." "That's not illegal." "Depends on what hard means." Donna looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up the coffee pot. "You want anything else?" "No, thanks." She started to go. Stopped without turning around. "Emily's been here 11 months, she said to the air in front of her. She had a different job lined up when she got hired here. Good job. Benefits. She turned it down because Travis told her he was going to put her on the management track. She's still waiting for that conversation. She walked away before he could respond. The afternoon slowed into that particular dead zone between lunch and dinner when roadside diners feel almost suspended, like time has lost its purpose temporarily. Most of the staff had cycled out. Emily was still there. She was doing side work, rolling silverware, refilling condiments with the focused mechanical energy of someone who uses task completion as a way to not think about other things. Jackson was still there too. She noticed eventually. She came over, probably planning to suggest he might want to consider moving along, and instead found herself looking at a man who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. Not threatening, not flirtatious. Something, "We stopped serving full meals at 3, she said, "but you can still get pie or coffee." "Okay," he said. She stood there a second. "You've been here for almost 3 hours. Good coffee." She almost laughed. Not quite, it caught somewhere in her throat, but almost. "Can I ask what you're actually doing?" "Sitting." "Sir Jackson, Jackson." She said his name like she was testing whether it was safe. "You've been watching the room for 3 hours. I noticed. I figured you did." He gestured at the chair across from him. "Sit down for a minute. I'm working. There are 2 people in this building, including you, and I don't think either of them needs silverware rolled right now." She looked around. He wasn't wrong. She sat down perched, really, on the edge of the seat, ready to stand up at any moment. "Your manager," Jackson said. "How long has that been going on?" Emily's expression went careful. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Then I'll be specific. The comment about your uniform. The positioning behind you when you were at table 6. The way he talked to you this morning. Through the window I came in during that. I heard the tail end of it. And I noticed the way you move through the room when he's in it versus when he isn't." She was quiet. "That's a long list of things to notice about someone you just met," she said finally. "I've been watching people for 51 years. It's a habit." She looked at her hands on the table. They were folded together tightly. "He's my manager. That's his job to correct me when I make mistakes. Does he correct Donna the same way?" Silence. Does he stand 4 inches behind her in front of customers to criticize her uniform? More silence. Emily, Jackson's voice was direct but not harsh. I'm not interested in making your life harder. I'm asking because I want to understand what's actually happening here. You can tell me it's none of my business, and I'll respect that. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't see what I saw. She looked up at him. Her eyes were doing that thing again, wet but not spilling. Why do you care, she said. You don't know me. You drove in off the highway. Yeah, that's not an answer, no, he agreed. It isn't. She waited. Jackson looked out the window for a moment. The desert out there was going gold in the afternoon light. The way it did this time of day, that particular quality of light that looked like the world was quietly catching fire. He had ridden through it enough times to know it was just the angle of the sun, but it still hit him somewhere every time. Some things didn't get old. When I was 19, he said, there was a man in my neighborhood who thought he was untouchable. He wasn't doing anything illegal that anyone could prove. He was the kind of man who hurt people in ways that didn't leave marks. And everyone around him could see it, including me. And not one of us said anything because it wasn't our business and we didn't want the trouble. He paused. I've spent about 30 years regretting that. So now, when I see something, I say something. That's the only answer I've got. Emily stared at him. His name was Gerald Marsh, Jackson added. The man in my neighborhood. He eventually got arrested for something unrelated, lived out his days in a way that involved a lot of consequences catching up to him. But that took 15 years. And in those 15 years, he hurt a lot of people. And all of us who stayed quiet were part of the reason it took that long. Emily was still staring. You've been carrying that for 30 years? More or less. She looked back at her hands. A long pause. When she spoke, her voice had changed. Something had gone out of it. The performance layer. He didn't used to be this bad, she said quietly. When I first started, he was strict, but it felt professional. I thought he was just someone who had high standards. When did it change? About 5 months ago. Maybe 6. She stopped. I reported something to the regional manager, something I saw involving our tip distribution. I thought I was doing the right thing. Regional came in, talked to Travis, and determined there was no violation. And after that, she exhaled slowly. He didn't say anything about it directly. He would never say anything directly. But after that, everything I did was wrong. Every shift, something I did was wrong. My sections got smaller. My hours got cut for 3 weeks. He started scheduling me for the early morning shifts, knowing I don't have a car and I have to take the bus. Jackson listened without interrupting. And then the comments started. About my work. About my attitude. About my uniform. Her jaw tightened. Always in front of other people. Always quiet. Always technically about work. So that if I said anything, if I complained, it would sound like I couldn't handle feedback. Like I was oversensitive. Who else knows? Everyone knows. She said it without bitterness. Just flatness. Donna knows. The other servers know. Luis in the kitchen knows. Everyone can see it. Nobody says anything because Travis controls our hours and our shifts, and one bad performance review can cost you your health insurance. And you? Jackson said. Have you said anything? She looked at him. To corporate, HR, anyone above regional. After the regional visit went the way it went, she shook her head slowly. I don't have money for a lawyer, Jackson. I have a lease and a bus pass and about $40 in savings. If Travis fires me and contests my unemployment, I don't have the resources to fight that. That's just the math of it. Jackson nodded. He sat with that for a moment. Please, Emily said suddenly, and there it was. The crack he'd heard earlier that morning. The one she'd been holding shut all day. Please don't tell him I said anything. You don't know what he does when I talk back. The words landed exactly the way they had the first time he'd heard them, quietly. With the weight of someone who had already calculated all the ways things could get worse, Jackson looked at her steadily. I'm not going to tell him anything, he said, and I'm not going to do anything without talking to you first. You understand? Nothing happens without your say-so. She searched his face. Whatever she was looking for, she found enough of it to keep going. She nodded. What time does your shift end? He said. 6. I'll be in the lot. If you want to talk more, I'll be there. If you don't want to talk more, I'll ride out and you'll never see me again. He paused. I mean that literally. Your choice entirely. Emily stood up slowly. She looked at him for another moment with that expression he couldn't quite name, except now he was beginning to understand it. It was the look of someone who had been waiting a long time to be taken seriously by someone who had no obligation to take them seriously. It was complicated. It had gratitude in it and wariness and something else underneath those things that was quieter and more fragile. I'll think about it, she said. She picked up her order pad and walked back toward the counter. At 6:15, she came through the back door of the diner in a pair of jeans and a gray sweatshirt, her hair still in the ponytail but tidier, her uniform folded over her arm. She stopped when she saw him leaning against the bike, and for half a second, he thought she was going to turn around. She didn't. She walked across the gravel lot and stopped about 6 feet away. She looked at the motorcycle. That thing looks like it weighs as much as a truck, she said. 830 pounds, he said. And you ride it across the country? I do. She nodded at nothing in particular. Must be nice, she said softly. Just going somewhere. He heard what was under that. The specific ache of someone who feels trapped in a place that has stopped being a choice. Tell me about the tip distribution thing, he said. The thing you reported 6 months ago. She hugged the folded uniform against her chest. Travis was taking a percentage of the shared tips and distributing them to the kitchen staff, which sounds fair. Except the kitchen staff had their own separate arrangement and weren't part of our tip pool agreement. He had the servers sign a form when they were first hired about tip pooling, but the form was vague, very vague. He used that vagueness to redirect money. I caught it because I kept my own records. How much money are we talking? Over the course of a year, for the servers here, maybe $3,000 total. Probably more. Each? No, total, divided between me and Donna and the 2 other servers. But $3,000 that wasn't going where it should have gone. And regional said there was no violation. The regional manager told Travis directly what I had reported and who reported it. Before he even spoke to me, her voice was carefully flat. So Travis knew exactly who had come to him and exactly what I had said before I had a chance to say anything further. Jackson was quiet for a moment. Do you still have your records? She looked at him. Yes, from when you started to now, every shift. Every tip amount. I kept a notebook. Smart, I wasn't keeping it for this reason. I was keeping it because I'm not good with money and I needed to track what I was earning. It just turned into something else. Okay, Jackson said. He pushed off the bike. Here's what I want you to understand. I'm not going to promise you anything I can't deliver. I'm not going to tell you this is going to be easy or that I have some kind of power that's going to make it disappear overnight. What I can tell you is that I know people. I know people who know employment law. I know people who have dealt with exactly this kind of situation before. And I think what you're describing is something that deserves more than one regional manager's opinion. Emily stared at him. The desert air was cooling now, the way desert air did when the sun dropped, going from furnace to something almost cold in the space of an hour. Why would you do this for someone you met today? Because you kept your records, Jackson said simply. People who keep records are people who believed, somewhere in the back of their mind, that the records were going to matter someday. You kept believing that even after regional went the way it went. That tells me something about you. She didn't have an answer for that. She looked at the bike again. Where do you sleep? When you're riding like this? Motels mostly. Sometimes camping. Tonight probably a motel in Tehachapi. There's a decent one on the 58, she said. Then, quieter, I live 6 blocks from here. If you want to come see the notebook, you can follow the bus. He looked at her steadily. You sure? A long pause. The desert wind moved through the space between them. No, she said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. The notebook was a spiral-bound composition book with a cracked cover, the kind sold 3 for $1 at dollar stores, and it contained 11 months of Emily Carter's working life in her careful, Slightly cramped handwriting. Every shift, every table count, every tip amount, every note she had made to herself. Travis moved my tables again. No explanation given. Travis told me my sections were being restructured. Travis commented on my hair in front of a full dining room. Jackson sat at her kitchen table, small, slightly unsteady on one leg, the kind of table that had been moved too many times, and read through it slowly. Emily sat across from him with her hands around a mug of tea, watching him read. Her apartment was small and clean, with the specific character of someone who didn't have much money but had worked hard to make a place feel like home. A couple of plants on the windowsill. A photo on the refrigerator. Two women who looked like mother and daughter, both laughing at something off camera. Books stacked beside the couch in the particular arrangement of someone who reads constantly but doesn't own bookshelves. This one, Jackson said, pointing to an entry from approximately 4 months ago. You wrote that Travis held you after your shift for 45 minutes without paying you for the time. He called it a performance review. Off the clock. Her voice was steady. I know what you're going to say. I know it's a wage violation. I didn't do anything about it. Why not? Because the last time I did something about something, it cost me. She looked at him over her mug. There's a math to surviving a situation like this. You have to calculate which battles actually help you and which ones just give him ammunition. How long have you been running that calculation? She thought about it. 8 months. Since things went bad after the regional visit. And how long can you keep running it? The question sat between them for a moment. I don't know, she said finally. It sounded like something she was admitting for the first time. I used to think I could just hold on until I had enough saved to leave. But the hours cuts took care of that. And now I feel like she stopped. Like what? Like maybe he's right about me. Her voice was very quiet. He says it so consistently. That I'm disorganized. That my attitude is a problem. That I make everything about myself. And I know, intellectually, that's not true. But it's 8 months of hearing something. Even when you know it's wrong, it starts to live somewhere in you. In the back of your head. This voice that sounds like him. Jackson set the notebook down. He looked at her across the table, this 25-year-old woman in her gray sweatshirt, in her small, clean apartment, who had kept meticulous records of her own mistreatment for 11 months because some part of her had never fully given up on the idea that evidence mattered. That truth mattered, that there was some mechanism in the world that responded to careful, documented truth. That voice isn't him, Jackson said. It's what he wanted to put there. There's a difference. She looked at him. He wanted you to believe it because a person who believes it stops fighting, stops keeping records, stops existing as a problem for him. You believed it enough to feel bad, but not enough to stop writing things down. He tapped the notebook. That's the important part. You didn't stop. Emily's eyes were wet. She blinked, set her mug down carefully on the table. I have a brother-in-law, Jackson said. His name is Pete Dolan. He spent 15 years doing employment law in Fresno. He's retired from the firm, but he consults. And he owes me a favor I've never called in. He paused. I'd like to give him a call tonight, if that's all right with you. Emily was very still. And what would that mean? It means someone with actual knowledge of California labor law looks at this notebook and tells us what we have. No commitments, no promises, just information. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, a bus went by on the street below. The familiar rumble of it, the brief wash of headlights across the ceiling. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's television played at low volume. Okay, she said, barely audible. Okay, Jackson repeated. He pulled out his phone. It was an older model he'd resisted upgrading for years, and he scrolled through the contacts slowly. Emily watched him find the number and dial. She wrapped both hands around her mug again. The tea had gone cold. She didn't move to warm it up. She sat very still and listened to Jackson Hayes, a man she had known for approximately 8 hours, who had ridden in off the highway on 830 pounds of motorcycle and ordered coffee and pie and proceeded to see exactly what was happening in the room when nobody else could be bothered to look. She listened to him say, "Into the phone, Pete." "Yeah, it's Jackson. I'm in Bakersfield." I've got a situation that needs your eyes on it. I know it's late. That's why I'm calling now, instead of in the morning. And something happened in Emily Carter's chest in that moment that was so unfamiliar it took her a few seconds to identify it. Someone was fighting in her corner, not for any reason that made practical sense, not because it benefited them, not because they had been paid or obligated or romantically motivated, just because he had walked into a diner, ordered coffee, and noticed. And because noticing to this man apparently meant something. Means you did something about it. She pressed her lips together, breathed carefully. She did not cry, but it was a very close thing. Pete Dolan called back at 11:47 that night. Jackson had his phone on the kitchen table between them, volume turned up, and Emily sat across from him with her hands folded in her lap and her back very straight, the posture of someone who had trained herself to receive bad news without visibly collapsing. She had been doing that for 8 months. She was good at it. Okay, Pete said, without preamble. He was a man who had spent 15 years in employment law and had never developed the habit of small talk before getting to the point. Walk me through the tip pool situation again. Slowly. Jackson looked at Emily. She leaned forward toward the phone. When I was hired, she said, I signed a form acknowledging our tip pool arrangement. The form said tips would be shared among front-of-house staff and kitchen support. The percentage wasn't specified in the form itself. Travis told us verbally it was a standard split. And what was the actual split? He told us 60% front-of-house, 40% kitchen. But when I started keeping records and comparing notes with the other servers, the math wasn't adding up. We were getting less than 40% of what we tipped out. The gap wasn't huge on any individual shift, $5 here, $8 there, but over months, across 4 servers, it accumulated. How long did you track it before you reported? 3 months. There was a pause on the line. And you still have those records? Yes. Another pause. Longer. Emily, under California Labor Code, tip pooling arrangements have to meet specific requirements. The distribution has to be clearly defined. A vague form combined with inconsistent verbal instruction is already a problem. But the bigger issue, he stopped. The bigger issue is that if Travis was redistributing tips in a way that benefited himself, or directing them outside the legally defined pool, that's not a civil matter, that's wage theft. Emily's breath caught, just slightly. Now Pete continued, I don't know that's what happened. I'd need to see your records. But what you're describing has the shape of it. He paused again. The retaliation piece is actually the stronger immediate case. California has very specific protections for employees who report labor violations, even internally. If you reported to regional, and Travis was subsequently informed, who made the report, which you said regional confirmed, and if your hours were cut, your sections were reduced, and you were subjected to increased scrutiny after that report, that's a textbook retaliation claim. Emily looked at Jackson. Her expression was something he hadn't seen on her face yet. It wasn't relief. It was something more fragile than relief. It was the particular expression of someone who has been told that the thing they experienced was real, was wrong, and has a name. What does a retaliation claim mean practically? Jackson said. It means she has legal standing. It means if she files a complaint with the California Labor Commissioner, they have grounds to investigate not just her word against his, but a documented timeline that predates the retaliation. Pete's voice was careful, measured, the voice of someone making sure he wasn't overpromising. I want to be clear. This isn't fast. It isn't easy. Travis will deny everything. The company will lawyer up, and Emily will need to be prepared for that process to be uncomfortable. He paused. But uncomfortable is different from hopeless. And right now, based on what you've described, this is not hopeless. Jackson watched Emily across the table. She nodded once to herself, to the phone, to no one in particular. A small private nod that meant something had just shifted inside her. Can I send you the notebook? Scan it, Pete said. Every page. Send it tonight if you can. I want to look at it before I say anything more definitive. Okay, and Emily. His voice shifted slightly, became something less lawyerly and more human. Don't go into work tomorrow acting differently. Don't confront him. Don't change anything yet. You understand? If a claim gets filed, you need a clean record going forward. Business as usual. Business as usual, she repeated. Her voice was flat. I know what I'm asking, Pete said quietly. I know. She nodded again, even though he couldn't see her. I understand. They hung up. The kitchen was very quiet. The neighbor's television had gone silent somewhere along the way. The building had settled into its nighttime sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic. He said, not hopeless, Emily said. He did. She looked at the notebook on the table. I've been carrying that thing for 11 months, thinking, maybe I was crazy. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was exactly what Travis said I was oversensitive. Making everything about myself, she touched the cover of it lightly with her fingertips. And a lawyer I've never met just told me I have standing. You always had standing, Jackson said. You just needed someone to confirm what you already knew. She looked at him. The wet in her eyes was back, and this time, she didn't fight it quite as hard. I have a phone that takes pictures, she said. I can photograph every page tonight. Then, let's do that. She sent the images to Pete at 12:44 in the morning. 43 pages. Jackson stayed until she had sent the last one, then stood up and put on his jacket. Emily walked him to the door. You'll come back tomorrow, she said. It came out smaller than she intended, an unguarded moment that surprised her. I'll be at the diner for breakfast, he said. 6:30, that's before my shift. I start at 8. I know. She understood then that he wasn't coming for breakfast. He was coming early, so he could watch the opening of the shift without her having to wonder whether he was there. She pressed her lips together. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. She didn't argue further. The coffee's better before 9, she said. After 9, Donna makes it, and she runs it a little weak. Good to know. She almost smiled. It was the closest thing to an unguarded smile he had seen from her, not the customer smile. Not the hollow one, but something small and genuine and slightly damp around the edges. Good night, Jackson. Good night, Emily. He rode to Tehachapi and checked into the motel on the 58 and lay on top of the bedspread, thinking about the math of situations like this one, about how long they lasted, about how many people passed through the vicinity of something wrong and kept moving, because keeping moving was easier and because the weight of other people's problems was real and heavy and not your responsibility. He had been one of those people once, for 15 years, in a neighborhood in Stockton, and he had decided a long time ago that he was done being that person. He set an alarm for 5:30 and closed his eyes. At 6:29 the next morning, he walked through the door of Sunrise Family Restaurant and took the same booth. A different server was working the opening, a young man, barely 20, with the slightly dazed look of someone who had not yet fully accepted that 6:30 in the morning was a real time of day. His name tag said Corey. He brought Jackson coffee without being asked, which Jackson appreciated and disappeared toward the kitchen. Travis arrived at 7:15. Jackson was on his second cup and had been reading the same 2 pages of a paperback he'd pulled from his saddlebag, not because he was actually reading it, but because it gave his eyes somewhere to go that wasn't the room. He heard the front door, heard the particular quality of footsteps that belonged to someone who considered every room their territory, and registered without looking up that Travis had arrived. Travis went through the dining room first. A quick scan, stopped at the counter, said something to Corey that made Corey's shoulders do the same thing. Emily's shoulders did that small animal tightening. Jackson made note of it. Not just Emily then. Not a personal fixation, a pattern. At 7:58, Emily came in. Jackson watched her come through the staff entrance from the parking lot side. She had a coffee travel mug in one hand, and her hair pulled back, and she was wearing the too big uniform that he was starting to suspect Travis had deliberately assigned her because it was the smallest indignity that cost him nothing. She was scanning the room as she came in looking for Jackson. He realized, though she was trying to be subtle about it. Their eyes met briefly when she spotted him. She gave nothing away. Just a quick look that said, "You're here," and then she was past it, tying on her apron, going through whatever the morning opening checklist was, doing exactly what Pete had told her to do. Business as usual. He watched her work for an hour before anything happened. The anything that happened was this. A woman came in at approximately 9 o'clock whom Jackson did not recognize. She was in her 60s, with the precise posture and the careful clothing of someone who had spent decades in professional environments, and she asked to be seated in Emily's section and asked for Emily by name. Jackson watched Emily's face cycle through 3 motions in about 2 seconds: recognition, warmth, and something cautious before she crossed to the table and greeted the woman. "Mrs. Perez," Emily said. "Emily, sweetheart." The woman reached out and pressed Emily's hand briefly. "Sit with me for a minute. I can't sit during my shift, then stand. It'll only take a moment." Jackson couldn't hear the conversation from across the room, but he watched it, and what he read in Emily's body language over the next 4 minutes was initial guarded surprise, shifting to something more open, shifting to something that looked almost like hope, and then a sudden, sharp contraction, like the hope had run into an obstacle. Emily nodded twice. The woman squeezed her hand again. Emily walked away with the slightly stunned look of someone who has just received information they weren't prepared for. Jackson waited. Emily came to refill his coffee, not because he needed a refill, but because it gave her a reason to get close to him without it looking deliberate. "Who is she?" he said quietly, not looking up. "Maria," Emily said, just as quietly, making a production of filling the mug. "She owned this diner for 17 years. She sold it 18 months ago to the corporate chain that owns it now. She comes in for breakfast on Thursdays sometimes, and we've talked. She knows me." A pause. "She knows about Travis." What did she say? Emily set the coffee pot down. Her hand wasn't completely steady. "She told me she has a meeting scheduled next week with the district manager. The new district manager, the previous one, retired 2 months ago. And she said she stopped." Took a breath. "She said she's been documenting things too." Jackson looked up at her. "She watches when she comes in," Emily said. "She told me she's kept notes. Dates, things she observed, names of staff she's spoken to. She was the original owner. She still knows people in the regional office." Emily's voice dropped even lower. "She said she tried to raise concerns when she first sold, but nobody listened to her because she was seen as being protective of her people. But the new district manager is someone she knows personally, and she thinks the timing might be right." Jackson held her eyes. "Are you going to tell Pete?" "I'm going to text him right now from the break room." "Okay." "And Emily." She picked up the coffee pot. "This is starting to move," he said. "You understand what that means. Travis is going to feel it, even if he doesn't know exactly what's happening yet. People who are used to control get," he chose the word carefully, "reactive. When they start to lose it." Emily looked at him with the steady, slightly exhausted look of someone who had already calculated this. "I know," she said. "I've been managing his reactions for 8 months. I know what reactive looks like." She went to the break room. She came back 3 minutes later. She picked up her section with the smooth, competent efficiency that was completely genuine, and that Travis had spent 8 months trying to convince her was inadequate. And she worked her shift, and she did not look once at the kitchen door with anything other than professional neutrality. Jackson ordered the soup again and decided it was actually quite good. Pete called at noon. "The notebook is solid," he said, when Jackson stepped outside to take the call. "The documentation is consistent, detailed, and covers a sufficient time period. The tip discrepancy? Cross-referenced with what she's written about the verbal explanations she received. That's going to be useful. But I want to talk about the retaliation timeline specifically, because that's where this becomes clear-cut." He paused. "Has she talked to the other servers, Donna specifically?" "Not yet. She needs to. Not to organize anything. Not to plan anything. Just to understand whether her experience is isolated or whether there's a pattern across staff. Because if Donna or anyone else has experienced similar treatment following any kind of pushback or complaint, that matters enormously. I'll tell her." Pete's voice shifted. "How invested are you in this?" A pause. "What do you mean?" I mean, you called me at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night about a waitress you met yesterday. I'm not asking because it's any of my business. I'm asking because I want to understand whether this is something I need to be thoughtful about in terms of how I proceed. Jackson leaned against the wall of the diner. The sun was high and direct, the kind of dead noon that felt like a physical pressure on the top of your head. She's a person who got into trouble for doing the right thing, he said. That's all. Pete was quiet for a moment. All right, he said. That's sufficient. What's the next step? Next step is a conversation with Donna. If Donna corroborates even partially, then Emily should file with the labor commissioner. I can walk her through the process. It's not as intimidating as it sounds, but someone needs to explain it to her in plain language. Can you come to Bakersfield? A pause. When? Whenever you can. Jackson, I'm retired. I know. Another pause. Longer. Jackson waited. He had learned over 51 years that silence was one of the most useful tools available to a person if they had the patience to let it work. Thursday, Pete said finally. I can drive down Thursday morning. I appreciate it. Pete? Yeah, well, a sound that was almost a laugh. You've been sitting on that favor for 11 years. I always wondered what you were going to use it for. A pause. A waitress in Bakersfield. Seems like the right thing. It does, Pete agreed quietly. It genuinely does. The conversation with Donna happened that afternoon, during the dead zone between lunch and dinner, and Jackson was not present for it because he understood that his presence would make it harder, not easier. He drove around Bakersfield for an hour and 40 minutes and thought about Gerald Marsh and about the specific texture of situations that looked contained from the outside but weren't. When Emily texted him, she talked. He pulled into a parking lot and sat with his phone for a moment before responding. He drove back to the diner and parked and waited. Emily came out at 4:05, still in her uniform, her face doing something complicated that he had to spend a few seconds decoding. She's been keeping her own records, Emily said without preamble when she reached the car. Her voice was slightly strangled. Since March of last year. Jackson didn't say anything. March of last year, Emily repeated. That's 4 months before my tip pool report. That's 4 months before any of this started with me. Donna has been writing things down for she stopped. Her hand went to her mouth briefly. I thought I was the only one he was doing this to. I thought I told myself it was because I reported him because I made myself a target. But Donna didn't report anything. She never said a word. She just kept her head down and did her job, and he did it to her anyway. Jackson let her sit with that for a moment before speaking. Did she say why she kept records? Emily lowered her hand. She said her daughter told her to. Her daughter is a paralegal. She told her mother 18 months ago that if anything ever went wrong at work, written records were what saved you. She exhaled. Her daughter told her that, and Donna started writing things down, and she's been carrying this notebook in her purse every single day since March of last year and never told anyone because she was losing her insurance. Will she talk to Pete? A pause. She asked me who Pete was, Emily said. I told her he was a retired employment lawyer who had agreed to look at my notebook. And she said Emily's voice broke slightly, and she pressed it back. She said, is he expensive? And I said, I didn't think so. And she said, because I've got about $200 in savings and I can't afford to lose this job. Jackson closed his eyes for half a second. $200 in savings. 20 years in this diner. A daughter who was a paralegal. A notebook carried in her purse for 18 months. Tell her Pete doesn't charge for consultations, Jackson said. And tell her that if this moves forward, this kind of case typically goes to the labor commissioner first. And that process doesn't cost her anything. Is that true? Yes. Are you sure? Pete would have told me if it wasn't. Emily looked at him with the particular expression of someone reassessing an assumption. You know a lot about employment law for a biker. I know a lot about a lot of things, Jackson said. I've had a long time to learn them. She almost smiled again. It was becoming more frequent, that almost smile. He thought that was probably a good sign. At 5:45, something happened that Jackson had been half anticipating and hoping would wait another few days. Travis called Emily into the office. She texted Jackson from the break room. He wants to see me. I don't know why, Jackson texted back. Pete's rule. Business as usual. Don't react to anything he says. 3 dots. Then okay. Then nothing for 22 minutes. Jackson sat in the parking lot and watched the front door of the diner and thought about Pete's word reactive and about what it meant that Travis had chosen today to call Emily in. He didn't know yet about the labor complaint. He didn't know about Pete. He might have seen Emily talking to Donna this afternoon. He might have seen something in Donna's body language or Emily's that registered to his particular instrument of control as a change in frequency. People like Travis were very finely tuned to changes in frequency. The front door opened. Emily came out. She was still in her uniform and her apron, but she had her purse with her, which meant her shift was over. She crossed the parking lot without looking around and got into Jackson's passenger seat and sat very still for about 4 seconds. He told me my performance has been declining, she said. He said he's been noticing a pattern over the past few weeks. Tardiness, attitude, customer complaints. She paused. I have not been late once in 11 months. I have never received a customer complaint that I'm aware of. And my attitude today was exactly what it always is. Jackson said nothing. He put it in writing, Emily said. He had a form. He wanted me to sign it acknowledging the performance issues. Her hands were in her lap, very still. I didn't sign it. Good. I told him I'd need time to review any documentation before signing. I said it very calmly and professionally. He told me that wasn't standard procedure and that refusing to sign could be noted as insubordination. Her voice was very controlled. Too controlled, the kind of control that takes real effort. I said I understood his concern and I would review the form and get back to him. And then I picked up my purse and said goodnight. Did he stop you? He said she stopped. He said, Emily, I've been very patient with you. I want you to think about whether this is really the right job for you. And I said, thank you for the conversation. Travis and I walked out. Jackson let a few seconds pass. You did exactly right. I know. Her voice finally cracked. Just slightly. I know I did. And I know why he did it. He's building a paper trail. He wants documentation that my performance was declining so that when he fires me, it looks justified. She pressed her lips together hard. He's been planning this. This wasn't today. He's been planning this. Emily. She looked at him. Her eyes were very bright. He's planning to fire you, Jackson said, because he's felt something shift. He doesn't know what it is yet. He doesn't know about Pete or about Donna's notebook or about Maria Perez's meeting with the district manager. But he felt it, and his instinct is to move first. He paused, which means we need to move faster. How much faster? Pete gets here Thursday. Between now and Thursday, I need you to do 2 things. First, do not sign anything he puts in front of you. Not without talking to Pete first. Second, I want you to think about whether there's anyone else in that building, besides Donna, who has experienced what you've experienced. A busboy, a cook, anyone. Because the more people who are willing to say so, the harder this becomes to dismiss. Emily was quiet for a moment. Luis, she said. The kitchen guy you mentioned. He's been there longer than I have. And Travis, she paused. Luis is Mexican-American. And Travis has said things to him in the kitchen where he thinks nobody from the front of house can hear. Her jaw was tight. I've heard things through the pass-through window. I wrote some of it down because it made me sick and I didn't know what else to do with it. Jackson's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. You wrote it down. Yes. Is it in the notebook? Last section. Last 6 pages. He nodded slowly. The picture was becoming clearer and clearer and bigger. This wasn't one waitress and an unreasonable manager. This was a pattern, documented across multiple employees, spanning 18 months, touching wage theft and retaliation, and since something that potentially crossed into territory considerably more serious than unfair scheduling. Travis Miller had made an error that a lot of people in positions of low-level power made. He had assumed that the people beneath him were too frightened and too isolated and too economically precarious to ever become a coordinated problem. He had managed them individually, kept them apart, made each of them feel like the only one, made each of them carry the weight of believing their experience was personal and specific, and therefore unshareable. He had never considered that someone might come along and connect the dots. Text Donna tonight, Jackson said. Tell her Thursday. Ask her to bring her notebook. She's going to be scared. I know. She has 20 years in this building. Jackson, she has more to lose than I do. I know that too. Emily looked at him. What do you tell someone who has that much to lose and is being asked to take a risk? He thought about it for a moment, gave her the honest answer. You tell them that the alternative is losing it slowly, a piece at a time, over the next however many years they have left. And then you let them decide. She sat with that. Okay, she said finally. I'll text her. She took out her phone. He watched her type the message, deliberate, careful, word by word, and send it. They sat in the parking lot while the desert evening came down around them, the light going that particular deep gold, and then rust, and then purple. And Emily's phone stayed quiet for 4 minutes and then buzzed once. She looked at the screen. She showed it to Jackson. Donna had sent back 3 words. I'll be there. Thursday came faster than Emily expected and slower than she could stand. The 2 days between Donna's text and Pete Dolan's arrival were the longest 2 days Emily Carter had worked in 11 months, and that was saying something, because the past 11 months had contained days she wouldn't wish on anyone. But those days had been hard in a way she understood. Travis's particular brand of cruelty was familiar by now. She knew its rhythms. She knew when it was coming and how to brace for it and how to hold herself together through it. These 2 days were hard in a different way. These 2 days were hard because she had something to lose now. Before Jackson walked into the diner, she had been surviving on a very specific kind of numbness. The numbness of someone who has stopped expecting things to change. It was bleak, but it was functional. It got her through the shifts, got her home, got her back through the door the next morning. But the moment Pete Dolan said the word standing, and the moment Donna said, I'll be there, and the moment Maria Perez mentioned the new district manager, the numbness cracked open, and underneath it was something raw and terrified and desperately, dangerously hopeful. Hope was harder to carry than numbness. That was something nobody told you. Hope had weight to it. Hope meant you could be disappointed in a way that numbness had protected you from. She got through Wednesday by doing exactly what Pete had said. Business as usual. She smiled at customers and refilled coffees and rolled silverware and absorbed Travis's 5:15 observation that her side work was consistently below standard without reacting, without responding with anything other than I'll make sure to address that. And she walked to her car at the end of the shift with her spine straight and her expression neutral, and she sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel with both hands until her knuckles went white, and then she drove home. Jackson texted her at 9 that night. Just, how'd it go? She stared at it for a while before answering. Fine, he's escalating. He wrote something else down. I didn't react. Good. Pete's leaving Fresno at 7. He'll be there by 9:30. She set her phone down. Picked it up again. Jackson, a pause. She typed and deleted 2 things before settling on, what if this doesn't work? He didn't answer immediately. She had learned in 3 days that this was not unusual. Jackson was not a man who responded to questions before he had thought about them. She found it oddly steadying, the way he didn't rush to reassure her. When the response came, 4 minutes later, it said, then we find the next thing. There's always a next thing. Get some sleep. She almost laughed. She didn't sleep particularly well, but she almost laughed, and that was something. Pete Dolan arrived at 9:22 Thursday morning in a Ford pickup that had seen better decades, wearing a short-sleeved button-down shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the expression of a man who had driven 2 hours and needed coffee immediately. He was 63, broad-shouldered, with a deliberate quality to his movements, not slow, just considered. He and Jackson shook hands in the parking lot of the diner, with the particular ease of men who had known each other a long time and didn't need performance. You look tired, Pete said to Jackson. You look old, Jackson said. Older than you, which was always the better position. Pete looked at the diner. This is the place. This is the place. All right. He adjusted the glasses on his forehead. Where's Emily? Emily was inside working her shift because it was 9:22 on a Thursday morning, and she couldn't exactly explain to Travis that she needed the morning off to meet with a retired labor attorney. She had arranged for the meeting to happen at noon, at her apartment on her lunch break. She had told Travis she had a doctor's appointment, which was the first lie she had told him that she did not feel guilty about. Pete, in the meantime, got coffee and read through the scanned photographs of Emily's notebook on his tablet, making occasional notes on a legal pad with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who had spent decades learning how to read between the lines of documentation. Jackson sat across from him and drank his own coffee and said nothing, because Pete thinking was something that worked better without interruption. Donna arrived at 11:15, half an hour before her shift started. She was in her regular clothes jeans and a green button-down, and she was carrying a purse large enough to function as a small suitcase, which Jackson had come to understand contained, among other things, 18 months of her working life in a composition notebook identical to Emily's. She spotted Jackson and came to his booth and sat down across from Pete with the cautious, evaluating look of a woman who has been let down by enough institutions that she approaches new ones with measured skepticism. "You're the lawyer," she said to Pete. "Retired," Pete said. "Pete Dolan." Donna Reyes. She put the purse on the table between them. "I've never talked to a lawyer before. Not about something like this." "That's all right," Pete said. "I've talked to a lot of people in your situation. It doesn't require experience, it just requires honesty." Donna looked at him for a long moment, assessed. "My daughter is a paralegal," she said. "She told me to get records. Your daughter gave you excellent advice. She's been telling me to leave this job for a year." Donna pulled the notebook out of her purse and set it on the table. It was thicker than Emily's more pages, the covers worn at the corners from 18 months of daily handling. "I kept telling her I couldn't afford to. After we talked today," Pete said, "you'll have a better sense of what your options actually are." Donna looked at the notebook, then at Pete, then briefly at Jackson. "Emily trusts you," she said to Jackson. "She called me last night. She said you were the real thing." "I'm just a man who knows a good lawyer," Jackson said. Donna almost smiled. She had the kind of face that had been handsome when she was young and had settled into something more interesting. The face of a woman who had done hard things and come through them and knew her own value without needing anyone to confirm it. She had been doing that without anyone confirming it for 20 years in a roadside diner, and she was still here. "All right," she said to Pete. "Ask me what you need to ask." The meeting at Emily's apartment started at noon and ran until 2:45. Pete sat at the small kitchen table with both notebooks open in front of him and his legal pad beside them, and Emily and Donna sat across from him. And what happened over those 2 hours and 45 minutes was something that both women would describe differently later. Emily would call it the first time. She understood that what had happened to her had a structure, a shape, a legal framework that named it. Donna would say, more simply, that it was the first time she felt like a person with rights instead of an employee with a contract. Pete walked them through everything. He explained what the labor commissioner's office did and how a claim was filed and what the process looked like. He explained the specific California statutes around tip pooling and wage theft and what Emily's records demonstrated in that regard. He explained what retaliation looked like, legally the timeline, the documentation requirements, what corroboration meant, and why Donna's independent records were significant beyond anything Pete had expected when Jackson first called him Tuesday night. "What I have in front of me," Pete said, at approximately 1:15, looking at both notebooks side by side, is not one person's account. It's two independent accounts, kept separately, without coordination, that document a consistent pattern of conduct over an overlapping period. Donna's records corroborate Emily's records in ways that neither of you could have manufactured because you didn't know each other was keeping them. Emily stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means that the argument Travis, or the company's lawyers, will make that Emily is a disgruntled employee with a personal grievance become significantly harder to sustain when there is an independent witness whose documentation predates Emily's complaint by 4 months and describes the same conduct. Donna was very still. He's been doing this since before Emily got here, she said. Not a question. Based on your records, yes. The behavior with you predates Emily's employment. I thought Donna stopped. Her jaw worked for a moment. I thought it got worse when Emily came because he liked her. Because she was young and she stopped again. He targeted her specifically, Pete said, carefully, after she reported him. But the underlying behavior was already there. The harassment of you predates her complaint by over a year. Donna looked at the table. Something moved through her face, anger and grief. And something complicated that Jackson, watching from the doorway where he'd positioned himself to be present without crowding the table, recognized as the particular feeling of having your suffering placed in a context larger than you'd understood it to be. It was validating and it was devastating at the same time. He made me feel like I was the problem, Donna said quietly. For 20 years, I thought it was me, that I was too slow or too old or too. She pressed her lips together. You spend long enough being told you're the problem. You start to do their work for them. Pete let that sit. He was good at knowing when to let things sit. Then, at approximately 1:45, he said the thing that changed the temperature in the room. There's something else, he said. He looked at Emily. The last section of your notebook. The things you documented from the kitchen. Emily straightened slightly. The things Travis said to Lewis. Yes, Pete paused. He chose his next words with the particular care of someone managing the weight of what they were about to say. What you've recorded there, those aren't workplace behavior issues. What you've described, in your own words, on those 6 pages, are statements made by a supervisor that constitute textbook hostile work environment harassment on the basis of national origin. Under Title VII, the kitchen was very quiet. That's federal, Emily said. That's federal, Pete confirmed. Which means this is no longer solely a California Labor Commissioner matter. This potentially involves the EEOC. He paused. And it means that Luis needs to be part of this conversation. Emily looked at Donna. Donna looked at Emily. Between them passed something that was not quite a look and not quite a conversation, but was absolutely a reckoning, both of them. Understanding simultaneously that what had begun as Emily's story, then become Emily and Donna's story, was in fact something considerably larger than either of them had been carrying alone. He's not going to want to come forward, Emily said. He's got 3 kids and a wife, and he sends money home to his mother in Oaxaca every month. He cannot afford to lose this job. I understand that, Pete said. He's more scared than either of us. I understand that too. Then how he doesn't have to file anything, Pete said. Not yet. Right now, what I'm asking is whether he would be willing to have a conversation. That's all. No commitment, no signature, no decision. Just a conversation with me so that I can understand what he experienced in his own words. Emily looked at her hands. I can ask him, she said slowly. I can ask him if he'll talk to you, but Jackson has to be there. Pete looked at Jackson in the doorway. Jackson nodded once. He trusts you? Pete said. He doesn't know me well enough to trust me, Jackson said, but he knows what I am. Sometimes that's enough to start. Luis Mendez agreed to meet at 4 o'clock at a taqueria 3 blocks from the diner that he had been going to for 12 years and where, he told Emily when she asked, nobody was going to look at him funny for talking to a biker and a retired lawyer over horchata. He was 38 years old and had been working in the Sunrise family restaurant kitchen for 9 years, which meant he had been there 5 years before Travis arrived and had watched the diner change in ways that he described, carefully and precisely, as getting smaller. He meant it the way people sometimes describe the experience of being managed by fear. The room doesn't get physically smaller, but your space inside it does, contracting around you as the things you're permitted to do and say and be get incrementally, invisibly reduced. His English was excellent, better than he let on at work, because he had discovered early in his tenure under Travis that appearing to understand less than he did was occasionally a form of protection. He had heard things Travis said in the kitchen that Travis clearly believed were private. He had been hearing them for 4 years. He listened to Pete explain the situation for 20 minutes without saying anything. He drank his horchata. He looked at the table, and occasionally at Jackson, and occasionally at Emily, and once, briefly at Donna, who had come because Emily had asked her to, and because Donna, it was becoming clear, was not someone who abandoned people once she had decided to stand with them. When Pete finished, Luis was quiet for a long time. "My youngest starts kindergarten in September," he said finally. Nobody answered that. "I have health insurance through the diner," he said. "My wife had a procedure last year. We're still paying the copays." Still nobody answered. There wasn't anything to say to that that wasn't either a promise Pete couldn't make or a minimization that Luis didn't deserve. "What he said to me," Luis said slowly. "The things you wrote down," he looked at Emily. "You heard all of that?" "Yes," she said quietly. "I thought nobody heard." A pause. "I thought nobody heard, and that was actually easier. Because if nobody heard, I could tell myself it wasn't as bad as I thought. That maybe I was misunderstanding him." His voice was flat in the way that voices go flat when the emotion behind them is too large for the words to hold. "But you heard it, and you wrote it down." "I wrote it down because I didn't know what else to do with it," Emily said, "and because it made me sick, and because I didn't want to forget it, even though part of me wanted to forget it very badly." Luis looked at her. Something shifted in his face, the particular expression of a man who has been trying to carry something alone and has just been told he doesn't have to. "I have my own records," he said. Pete went very still. "I'm sorry. My daughter, she's 16. She told me," he almost smiled. "Kids, you know. She follows things online, knows about workers' rights. She told me 8 months ago that I should be writing things down. So I have." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "I don't have a notebook. I have voice memos." He set the phone on the table. "I recorded things. When he said things in the kitchen, I had my phone in my apron pocket. I recorded 17 of them." The table went completely silent. Pete looked at the phone, then at Luis, then at Jackson. His expression, for the first time since he'd arrived that morning, had moved past professional composure into something more basic. Something that looked like a man confronting the fact that what he'd come to Bakersfield to assess as a moderate retaliation case had just become something categorically different. "Luis," he said carefully, "those recordings, depending on when they were made and how, may be among the most significant pieces of evidence in this entire situation." Luis looked at him steadily. "I know," he said. "My daughter told me." Emily pressed her hand over her mouth. Donna set her coffee down. Jackson looked at the ceiling for half a second and then back at the table. "California is a two-party consent state," Pete said, "already working through it. For recordings to be, I know," Luis said again. "My daughter looked it up. We talked about it. I only recorded things that happened in spaces where employees had no reasonable expectation of privacy: the kitchen line, the prep area, the back storage room. And I only recorded when he was speaking at a volume that other staff could hear. My daughter made me write down the time and location of every recording the same day I made it." He paused. "She's going to be a good lawyer someday, I think." Pete stared at him for a moment. Then he said very quietly, "Yes, I think she probably will." They were in the taqueria for 3 hours. By the time they left, the sun was going the color of old copper, and the street outside was cooling, and Pete had filled 12 pages of his legal pad. He walked to his truck with the focused, private expression of a man, reorganizing everything he thought he knew about a situation. Jackson walked with him. "Tell me what you're thinking," Jackson said. Pete leaned against the truck. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that this started as a single retaliation complaint and has become a multi-plaintiff case involving wage theft, retaliation, hostile work environment, and potential Title VII violations. I'm thinking that the documentation, 3 independent sets of records, 17 audio recordings with timestamps and location logs, is better than 90% of what I saw in active practice." He paused. "And I'm thinking that Travis Miller has been operating under the assumption that these people were too isolated and too scared to ever become a coordinated problem. He was wrong about that. He was catastrophically wrong about that. Pete looked at Jackson. What made you stop at that diner? Jackson was quiet for a moment. Long ride, needed coffee. Jackson, my back hurt. I told you. I'm 51. Pete looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. You know what the filing of these complaints is going to do, he said. The corporate chain that owns that diner is going to have to respond. That means Travis loses the thing that makes him Travis, the insulation. The ability to manage everything at the local level without oversight. I know. And the 3 people in that taqueria still have to go to work tomorrow morning. I know that too. They're going to be exposed to whatever Travis does when he realizes something is happening. And he will realize something is happening. How long before the labor commissioner contact gets back to the company? Pete thought about it. Filing to first contact, typically 2 to 3 weeks. But he paused. There's something else, Maria Perez, Emily told me. The original owner. If Perez goes into that meeting with the new district manager with even partial information about what's in those notes before a formal complaint is filed, the company might move on Travis internally before the commissioner gets involved at all. He looked at Jackson. That could be faster. And it could be cleaner for Emily and Donna and Luis, because an internal action doesn't require them to be as exposed publicly. Can you talk to Perez? Emily would need to facilitate that. It's her story to control. He paused. She's not going to want to wait. Jackson. She's been waiting a long time already. Once people have decided to move, waiting is hard. I'll talk to her. Pete nodded. He opened the truck door. You know what I keep thinking about? Tell me. The daughter who told Donna to keep records. The daughter who explained 2-party consent law to Luis and made him write down timestamps. Pete shook his head. These people were doing everything right, by themselves, in isolation, without any coordination. They just needed someone to connect them. He got in the truck and drove away. Jack stood in the cooling street for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called Emily. She picked up on the second ring. What did Pete say? He said you should call Maria Perez tonight. A silence. Then he thinks that's the right move. He thinks it's the faster move. And he thinks you should be the one to decide. Another silence. Longer. I'm scared, she said. I want to be honest with you about that. I'm very scared. I know. What if Perez goes into that meeting and the district manager doesn't care? What if it's just another regional manager who covers for Travis? Then we file with the commissioner and we let the process run. That takes months. Yes. And in those months, I still have to go to work every day and look at him. Yes. Jackson paused. I know that's a real thing I'm asking you to be prepared for. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. The line was quiet for a long time. He could hear her breathing, steady, deliberate, the breathing of someone working to stay calm. Donna said something to me in the car on the way home. Emily said finally. She said she's worked in that building for 20 years, and she has never once felt like what she did mattered. She said today was the first day she felt like it mattered. A pause. I don't want to be the reason that stops. You're not going to be the reason it stops. You can't promise that. No, he said. I can't, but you believe it. He thought about it, gave her the honest answer. Yes, she breathed out. Okay, she said, I'll call Maria Perez tonight. A pause. Jackson. When Pete drove away just now, did he look? I don't know. Did he look like it was bad? No, Jackson said. He looked like a man who hadn't had a case this solid in 15 years and was trying not to show how much he wanted to take it. A short silence. Then Emily Carter laughed, a real laugh, brief and startled and genuine. The kind that comes out before you've decided to let it. It was the first time Jackson had heard her laugh. He thought about it for a moment after they hung up, standing in the street with the copper light going purple around him. 3 composition notebooks and a phone full of voice memos and a 16-year-old girl who had looked up 2-party consent law in California to protect her father. Donna Reyes carrying evidence in her purse every single day for 18 months. Emily Carter writing down the things that made her sick because she didn't know what else to do with them. Travis Miller had spent 4 years building a world in which he was untouchable. He had never once considered the possibility that the people he was trying to silence were the most meticulous record keepers in the building. Maria Perez picked up on the third ring. Emily had been standing in her kitchen for 6 minutes before she dialed, phone in hand, running through every version of the conversation in her head. The one where Maria said it was too complicated. The one where Maria said she had already tried and it hadn't worked. The one where Maria was warm and willing, and Emily said all the wrong things anyway. She had been rehearsing failure so long that when Maria actually answered, Emily's first word came out as something closer to a breath than a greeting. Emily. Maria's voice was immediate, warm, without surprise, as though she had been expecting this call at roughly this hour. I saw you today at the diner. You looked like you were holding something heavy. I was, Emily said. I still am. Mrs. Perez, I need to talk to you about something. Something real. A pause. Then I think I've been waiting for you to call, Maria said simply. Tell me everything. So Emily told her. All of it, the notebook, Donna's notebook, Luis's voice memo, Pete Dolan, the labor commissioner, the EEOC, the retaliation timeline, the performance review Travis had tried to make her sign 2 days ago. She talked for 22 minutes without stopping. And Maria Perez listened without interrupting. And when Emily finally ran out of words and stood in her kitchen in the quiet aftermath of having said all of it out loud to someone for the first time, as a complete story beginning to end, the whole architecture of it, she felt something she couldn't immediately name. Lighter. She felt lighter. Like she'd been carrying a physical weight that had just been redistributed. Emily, Maria said when the silence had settled. Her voice was careful and deliberate in the way of someone who is choosing each word before releasing it. I need to tell you something that I should have told you a long time ago and didn't because I was trying to protect you from it and I think I made a mistake. Emily went still. What? When I sold the diner 18 months ago, Maria said, I didn't choose to sell. The corporate chain made me an offer I couldn't refuse because my husband had gotten sick and the medical bills were, she stopped. It doesn't matter, I sold. And when I handed everything over, I tried to have conversations with the new regional manager about the staff, about the people who had worked for me. I told him I was concerned about the management structure Travis was building. What did he say? He said I was being sentimental. A beat. He used that exact word, sentimental. And he told me that Travis had consistently strong numbers, low turnover compared to regional average, good efficiency metrics, customer return rates. On paper, the diner under Travis looked like a success story. On paper, Emily said. On paper, Maria's voice went tight. What the numbers didn't show was why turnover was low. It was low because people were too scared to leave, because Travis had made himself the gatekeeper for their references, because Donna had a daughter in college and couldn't afford to walk out, because Luis had a family he was sending money home to. The numbers looked good because the people under them were trapped. Emily sat down on the kitchen floor. She wasn't sure when her legs had stopped feeling reliable. Why are you telling me this now? Because you just told me there are 3 independent sets of records, Maria said. And because my meeting with the new district manager, Daniel Okafor, is Monday morning. And because Daniel is not the regional manager who called me sentimental. Daniel came up through a different part of the company, and I know him well enough to know that he takes this kind of thing seriously. She paused. But, Emily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay, are you prepared for this to be real? Because right now it is still a set of notebooks and a phone call and a retired lawyer. Once I walk into that meeting Monday morning and put this in front of Daniel Okafor, it becomes something that cannot be made smaller again. Travis will know. The company will know. And your life for the next several months is going to be, she paused, searching for the word, complicated. Emily looked at the ceiling of her kitchen, at the small water stain in the corner that the landlord had promised to fix 6 months ago, at the fluorescent light she'd replaced twice because the fixture ate bulbs faster than anything she'd ever seen. This small kitchen in this small apartment in Bakersfield California, that she had come to because of a job offer that Travis Miller had used as bait, and then, slowly, methodically made into a trap. "Mrs. Perez," she said, "I have $40 in savings and I ride a bus to work. My situation is already complicated. The only thing that changes Monday is whether the complication is still only mine." A long silence on the line. Then Maria said softly, "Your mother raised you right." "She tried," Emily said. "I didn't always make it easy. None of us do." Another pause. "All right, send me everything Pete Dolan is willing to share. And tell your lawyer friend he did good work." "He's Jackson's lawyer friend, then tell Jackson." A pause. "Who is he, this Jackson?" "You mentioned him and then kept moving past him, like you weren't sure how to explain him." Emily thought about that. About a man who had ridden in off the highway because his back hurt and ordered coffee and pie and proceeded to treat the things happening in a roadside diner as though they mattered enough to actually do something about. "He's a Hell's Angel," she said. A beat of silence. Then Maria Perez laughed, a real, full laugh that Emily had heard maybe a dozen times in 2 years, and that always felt like something being released. "Of course he is," Maria said. "Of course, all right. Emily, Monday morning. I'll call you after." Emily sat on the kitchen floor for a while after they hung up. Then she called Jackson. "She's going in Monday," she said when he picked up. "She wants Pete's documentation, and she asked who you were." "What did you tell her, the truth?" A pause. "How'd she take it?" She laughed. "People usually do," Jackson said, not unkindly. "Get some sleep, Emily. Monday's 4 days away, and you have 3 shifts between now and then." She pressed the back of her head against the cabinet behind her. "Jackson, he's going to fire me before Monday. I can feel it. He's been building towards something, and I don't think he's going to wait much longer." "What makes you say that?" "He's been watching me differently. The last 2 shifts, he keeps finding reasons to come to my section. Little comments, nothing I can point to and call harassment. Just pressure. He's applying pressure and waiting to see if I'll crack." A pause. "Has Donna noticed?" She says yes. She thinks he might be doing the same performance review thing with Lewis, feeling out who he can move against first. Jackson was quiet for a moment. "Okay, I'm going to be at the diner tomorrow morning. And Saturday. I'll take a booth and order coffee and I'll be visible. You can't babysit me through every shift." "I'm not babysitting you. I'm a customer who likes the coffee. Travis can't do anything about customers." A pause. "And my presence makes him think about whether what he's doing is worth whatever it costs him. It introduces a variable he doesn't control." Emily understood the logic. She also understood something else about it, that Jackson showing up was not purely tactical. That some part of it was simply what he was as a person who showed up. She decided not to say that out loud because she wasn't sure she could get through it without her voice doing something she'd regret. "The coffee's still better before 9, she said instead. "I know. I'll be there at 6:30. Friday was the longest shift Emily had ever worked. Not because anything dramatic happened, which was, in its own way, more frightening than if something had. Travis moved through the diner all morning with the quiet, controlled energy of a man who has made a decision he hasn't yet implemented. He corrected Emily twice, once about the placement of a condiment caddy, once about the way she had logged a table substitution request, both times in front of Donna, both times in the tone he used when he wanted witnesses to his reasonableness. He was establishing something. She could feel him establishing it. Jackson sat in his booth. He didn't watch Travis directly. He didn't have to. His presence in the room was sufficient. This large, quiet man in a leather vest with a Hell's Angels patch on his back, who came in every morning and ordered coffee and tipped 30% and said very little. Travis had looked at him twice on Thursday, and both times looked away first. He hadn't spoken to him. Jackson had the particular quality that some people have, and that Travis understood instinctively, even if he couldn't have articulated it, of being someone whose approval you would not want to lose. Not because he was threatening, because he was watching, and his judgment was visible in his eyes, and nobody comfortable in their own behavior worried that much about being watched. Corey, the young morning server, found Jackson at 11. and leaned against the booth with the studied casualness of someone who wants to say something and is figuring out how to start. "You've been in here every day this week," Corey said. "Good coffee," Jackson said. Corey looked at him. "You know Emily?" "I do." Another look. Are you here because something's happening?" Jackson studied the young man for a moment. Corey was maybe 22, slightly built, with the wide-open face of someone who hadn't yet learned to protect his expression from his thoughts. He was worried. It was visible. "Why do you ask?" Jackson said. Corey shifted his weight. "Because Travis has been different this week. And because Emily looks," he stopped. "She looks like someone who's waiting for something bad to happen. And I know that look because I've been wearing it for 6 months." Jackson set his coffee down. "Sit down, Corey." Corey glanced toward the kitchen. "I can't. Travis is in the office. Donna's covering the floor." "Sit down for 2 minutes." Corey sat. He folded his hands on the table with the uncomfortable rigidity of someone sitting in front of a person whose opinion matters to them for reasons they don't fully understand. "How long have you been here?" Jackson said. 7 months. "And how long before things were uncomfortable?" A pause. The question landed, and Corey's careful expression came apart at the edges. "About 2 months in." When he figured out that he stopped, looked at his hands. "I'm gay. I don't make it a thing. I don't talk about it at work. But Travis figured it out, and after that, there was always something wrong with my work. Always. No matter what I did." His voice had dropped very low. "He's never said anything explicit. He's smart about that. It's always about performance. Always about professionalism." He looked up. "But I know what it is." Jackson was quiet for a moment. "Do you have records of any of it?" Corey stared at him. "What? Written records, dates, incidents," was said. "No." Why would I?" He stopped. Something shifted in his face as he worked through the implications of the question. "Is that what Emily's been doing?" "I'm asking about you right now." Corey was quiet for a long stretch. "Then I have a journal. It's personal. But I've written about work things in it because I didn't have anywhere else to put them." "Would you be willing to talk to a lawyer?" The word lawyer hit Corey like a change in air pressure. His posture changed. He looked at the table at the window. At Jackson. "I'm on a student visa," he said quietly. "I have 1 more semester. I can't. If I lose this job before the end of the semester, I lose my status." Jackson absorbed that. The specific texture of vulnerability this young man was carrying, not just the job but the country, the semester, the future, all of it balanced on staying employed in a diner where his manager had identified a truth about him and weaponized it. "I'm not asking you to do anything that puts your status at risk," Jackson said carefully. "I'm asking you to talk to someone who knows what the options actually are. That's all. You might hear what he has to say and decide it's not something you can do right now. And that's a legitimate decision." Corey looked at him. "Who is the lawyer?" "His name is Pete Dolan. He's retired. He came from Fresno. He came to Bakersfield for the S." Corey was very still. "How many people are involved in this?" Jackson held his gaze. "More than Travis knows." Something happened in Corey's face, something young and overwhelmed, and also, underneath both of those things, the particular expression of someone who has been alone with something too long and is encountering for the first time the possibility of company. "I get off at 3, Corey said. "I can meet whoever you want at 3. I'll set it up." Corey stood. He straightened his apron. He looked at Jackson one more time, with the expression of someone committing to a decision before they can talk themselves out of it. Then he walked back to the floor. Jackson picked up his coffee. He looked out the window. He thought about how many people could exist in one small building, each of them carrying something too heavy and too isolating, each of them managed into believing they were alone. Travis Miller had built himself a kingdom. He just hadn't understood that kingdoms built on other people's fear have a specific structural weakness. They require everyone to stay afraid at the same time. Pete met Corey at a coffee shop at 3:15 and called Jackson at 4:45. 4, Pete said, without preamble. "What?" 4 employees with documented patterns of targeted misconduct by the same supervisor. Emily, Donna Lewis, and now this young man. His voice had the flat, focused quality it got when he was working through something at high speed. Jackson, do you understand what I'm saying? This is not a retaliation case anymore. This is not even primarily a wage theft case. What this has become is a systemic hostile work environment case with 4 separate plaintiffs across 4 separate protected categories: age, national origin, sex in terms of Emily's particular treatment, and sexual orientation. Jackson was in the motel parking lot. The late afternoon light was the color of something burning. Can Pete Dolan handle a case this size? A pause. Pete Dolan is retired, Pete said. Pete Dolan has been having very quiet conversations this afternoon with a former colleague at the Fresno office of Nichols and Park, which is a firm that does exactly this kind of employment litigation. And Pete Dolan's former colleague expressed the opinion that what Pete Dolan has assembled is some firm would be very interested in taking on a contingency basis. Contingency, Jackson said. No upfront cost to the plaintiffs. The firm gets paid when the case resolves, which is relevant given that your group of plaintiffs collectively has a pause during which Jackson could hear Pete doing math. Somewhere in the range of $240 in combined savings. Jackson looked at the sky. Pete, I know, is this real? Jackson. Pete's voice was very steady. I have been practicing and consulting in employment law for 37 years. I have seen perhaps a dozen cases in that time that I would call clean where the documentation was tight, the corroboration was independent, and the pattern was unambiguous. This is one of those cases. A pause. Travis Miller is not a subtle man. He is a man who believed so completely in the powerlessness of the people around him that he never bothered to be subtle. And he has been doing this, documented, across 4 employees over a period spanning nearly 2 years. Monday, Jackson said. Maria Perez goes to the district manager Monday. I know. I spoke to her this afternoon. She's going to share a summary of the situation with Okafor, nothing from the notebooks themselves, because those are potentially evidence. Just what she personally witnessed and what she's prepared to corroborate. She wants to give the company an opportunity to handle this internally before the formal complaints are filed. Is that the right move? It depends on what Okafor does with it. If he acts decisively, the employees are protected faster and with less exposure. If he buries it, Pete stopped. Then we file Monday afternoon, Jackson exhaled. How do I tell Emily? Tell her it got bigger. She's going to be terrified. Yes, Pete said. She is. And she's also going to be the person who made it possible. Because without her notebook, none of the other pieces came together. She was the one who started writing things down and the one who trusted you enough to show it to someone. He paused. I don't say this about many people, Jackson. But that girl is remarkable. Jackson said nothing. He looked at the burning sky for a moment. I'll tell her, he said. He told her in her kitchen at 6 that evening. And he watched her face move through 6 different emotions in the space of 30 seconds. Shock, disorientation, a flash of something that was almost fear, then a slow, complex settling that wasn't peace exactly, but was something in the same neighborhood. 4 of us, she said. 4 Corey. She pressed her hand flat on the table. I knew something was happening with him. I could see it. I asked him once if he was okay and he said he was fine. And I should have pushed harder. You were managing your own situation, Jackson said. You can't take responsibility for not seeing something you weren't in a position to address. He's on a student visa. Pete knows that. The firm he's bringing in will know that. It's a factor in how the case is built, not a reason he can't be part of it. She was quiet. What does Corey's situation mean for the other categories? Pete said 4 protected categories. Age for Donna. National origin for Luis, sexual orientation for Corey, and your retaliation claim, which functions as its own category because it's documented so precisely. Emily looked at the wall for a moment. Travis picked all of us for the same reason, she said slowly. He picked us because he thought we were vulnerable, because we each had something to lose that he could leverage. He was strategic about it. He didn't bully randomly. He identified what each person was afraid of and used it. Yes, Jackson said, which means this wasn't about any of us individually. Her voice had gone very quiet. It was never about me being difficult or Donna being slow or Luis making mistakes. We were just targets he'd evaluated and found useful. That's what the evidence suggests. She sat with for a long time. Then something happened that Jackson hadn't seen before and didn't expect. She stopped looking sad or scared and started looking angry. Clean, clear, focused angry. The kind of angry that doesn't shout. The kind that sits down and decides. Good, she said. He looked at her. If it were personal, I'd have to wonder what I did to cause it, she said. But if it's systemic, if it's a pattern he built deliberately, then this isn't about my performance or my attitude or whether I'm too sensitive. It's about what he is. She looked at Jackson with the steadiest expression he had seen from her yet. And what he is someone who made a catastrophic mistake in his choice of targets. Jackson held her gaze. It's going to be a hard few months. I know. Even if everything goes right, there are going to be days where it feels like nothing is moving and Travis is still standing in the same room as you, and the weight of it is going to be real. I know that too. Are you ready? She thought about it. Genuinely thought about it. The way she did things, not rushing to the reassuring answer, but sitting in the honest question long enough to know what she actually believed. I'm not ready, she said finally. I don't think ready is something I get to be. I think I just get to be scared and do it anyway. She paused. Is that enough? Jackson thought about 30 years of decisions made scared, on broken roads and in complicated rooms, with incomplete information and no guarantee of outcome. He thought about the specific courage required not to be fearless, but to act in the presence of fear, which was a different thing entirely and considerably harder. That's always been enough, he said, for anything that actually mattered. Saturday started like every other Saturday and ended nothing like it. Travis came in at 8:15, which was earlier than his usual arrival. Emily registered it immediately, the change time, the particular quality of his footsteps, the fact that he went directly to the office without doing his usual floor walk. Donna texted Emily from the back, he's on the phone. Sounds serious. Emily served her tables. She smiled at customers. She refilled coffee. She existed in the strange suspended state of someone who is waiting for an explosion they know is coming, but cannot predict to the minute. At 9:40, Travis came out of the office. He walked directly to Emily's section. He stood in the middle of the dining room and said, at a volume that was carefully pitched to carry to the surrounding tables without sounding like a scene, Emily, I need you in the office. Jackson was in his booth. He set down his coffee cup. Emily looked at Travis. She looked at Jackson for exactly 1 second, no more, and what passed between them in that second was not panic. It was something steadier than panic. It was the look of someone who has made a decision and is about to find out what it costs. Of course, she said to Travis. Let me just let Donna know I'm stepping away. She walked to Donna's station. Donna was already watching. Emily said, quietly and precisely, he's taking me to the office. Text Pete. Already doing it, Donna said without looking up from the coffee station. Emily walked to the office. Travis closed the door behind them. He sat behind the desk. He put a single sheet of paper on the desk between them. He looked at Emily with the expression she had seen him use before when he believed he was about to resolve a problem, satisfied, rehearsed, and underneath both of those things, something mean. I'm going to need your uniform back by end of day, he said. Emily looked at the paper. It was a termination notice. Her name was at the top. The reason given was continued performance deficiencies and failure to meet established standards of conduct. She had written down 37 incidents in 11 months. Donna had written down 62 in 18. Luis had recorded 17 on his phone. Corey had a journal. And Travis Miller had just handed her a piece of paper. She picked it up. She read it carefully, the way Pete had told her to read anything he put in front of her. She set it back down. She looked at Travis. I'd like a copy of this, she said. Her voice was completely even. Travis blinked. He had expected something else. Tears, maybe. Or argument. Or the crumbling compliance she had given him for 8 months. He had not expected this particular stillness. Standard procedure is I'd like a copy, she said again. For my records. A very short silence. Travis picked up the paper. walked it to the printer on the credenza behind him, made a copy and handed it to her. "Thank you," Emily said. She folded it carefully and put it in her apron pocket. She looked at him across the desk. "Is there anything else?" Travis stared at her. For the first time in the 8 months she had known him, he looked uncertain. Not much, just a flicker. But it was there. The flicker of a man who has played his move and found the board responding in a way he hadn't modeled. "That's all," he said. Emily stood up. She walked to the door. She opened it. She turned back once, the way you turn back when you want to make sure someone is looking at you. "Have a good Saturday, Travis," she said. She walked out of the office and across the dining room to Jackson's booth and sat down across from him. She put the folded termination notice on the table between them without saying anything. Jackson looked at it, then at her. Her eyes were dry. Her hands were completely still. "He did it," she said. "I know. Pete said this would actually help the case." "It does. Documented retaliation following a pattern of adverse action. It's the cleanest piece of the timeline." She nodded slowly. "I know that intellectually." A pause. "It still feels like getting hit." "Yes," he said. "It does." She breathed out through her nose. Outside, the morning was moving on the way mornings did, customers coming in. The bell above the door, the sound of dishes from the kitchen, Donna's voice carrying across the dining room. The diner continuing to exist without her in it for the first time in 11 months. "What happens now?" she said. Jackson looked at her steadily. "Now," he said, "we make Monday come faster." Her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. "Pete, got Donna's text. This is exactly what we needed. Call me in 10 minutes. She looked up at Jackson. Something had shifted in her face, not the anger from last night, not the fear she'd been wearing for months. Something new. The particular expression of a person standing at the exact moment when the thing they've been dreading has finally arrived and they've discovered, to their own surprise, that they are still standing. "He thought firing me would be the end of it," she said. "He did." She looked at the termination notice on the table between them. Then she picked up her phone to call Pete. "He miscalculated," she said. The call from Sandra Park came on a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks after the filing. Emily was at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, going through notes Pete had sent her about the EEOC process, when her phone rang and Sandra's name came up, and her heart did the thing it had been doing. Every time a number she recognized appeared on her screen, a single hard beat, like a door being knocked on from the inside. She picked up. "They want to talk," Sandra said, without preamble. "Corporate counsel reached out this morning. They're proposing a mediation session." Emily set down her pen. "What does that mean?" "It means they've looked at what we filed and they've made a calculation. Fighting this in front of the EEOC and the labor documentation you have is a worse outcome for them than settling. Mediation is them signaling they want to find a number." Sandra's voice was precise and even. "It's not a concession. It's not an admission. It's a business decision. But it's also the fastest path to resolution for your people." "When?" "They proposed 2 weeks from Friday." Emily looked at the legal pad in front of her. At the notes Pete had written, process timelines, evidentiary standards, what corroboration meant in front of a commissioner. All the careful architecture of a case she had spent 6 weeks learning to understand. "Is this good news?" she said. "I know it sounds like good news, but I want to know what you actually think." Sandra paused. And Sandra Park did not pause unless she was giving a genuine answer. "It's good news with conditions," she said. "Mediation is faster and less traumatic for your people than a full process. But it also means the company gets to control the narrative to some degree. Travis Miller faces corporate action, not public legal judgment. The numbers will be non-disclosed." She paused again. "What I need to know is what your 4 plaintiffs need from this. Whether resolution means a dollar figure or whether it also means something more visible than a settlement." Emily thought about that. She thought about what each of them had said over 6 weeks of Sunday dinners and phone calls and long conversations at her kitchen table. She thought about what Donna needed, 20 years of work acknowledged as real. About what Luis needed, safety, stability, his kids covered. About what Corey needed his visa intact and his last semester finished, and his future not derailed by a manager who had targeted him for something he hadn't chosen. And about what she herself needed. "Can I have 24 hours?" Emily said. "You have until tomorrow morning," Sandra said. "Call me." She called Donna first. Donna answered at the diner on her break, whispering into the phone from the staff room in the way she had for 6 weeks, because Travis was gone, but the habit of caution didn't lift overnight. The acting manager, a woman named Greta, who had been brought in from the regional office, was different in all the ways that mattered, but Donna still moved through the building with the careful body language of someone unlearning a long lesson. "Mediation," Emily said. "They want to settle." A silence. "Is that good?" "Sandra thinks it can be. Faster than the full process. The money would be real." Emily paused. "But Travis doesn't go to court. There's no public record. The company manages it quietly." Another silence. Longer. "Do they admit what happened?" "Not in those words. That's not how settlements work." Donna breathed out slowly. "Emily, I have 20 years in that building. I don't need a court to tell me what happened to me. I know what happened to me. What I need is to not have it happen to anyone after me." "What would make you believe it won't?" Donna thought about it. "Policy," she said. "Written, specific, enforced policy. Not a number on a piece of paper. Anyone can pay a number. I want the thing that makes the next Donna harder to happen." Emily wrote that down. She called Luis next. Anna answered because Luis was on his shift, and Emily told her to have him call when he was out. And Anna said, "He's going to want to know if it's over." And Emily said, "It might be getting there." And Anna said something quiet in Spanish that Emily didn't catch, but understood anyway. Luis called at 3:15. "Mediation," Emily said again. "Settlement, it could be fast." "How fast?" "Weeks instead of months." A pause. She could hear the particular quality of his silence, a man calculating against a very specific set of numbers. 3 kids, a wife, a mother in Waka. Medical copays still outstanding. "Would I still have my job?" he said. "That's part of what gets negotiated. Your position, your hours, your back pay for the tip violations. The recordings," he said. "My daughter's recordings. They are part of why the company wants to settle." Sandra said the audio documentation was significant. "Yes." Then Luis said very quietly, "My daughter is 16 years old. She sat at our kitchen table and looked up California recording law on her phone because she was scared for me and she wanted to help." His voice had the particular rough quality of someone pressing down on something large. "If this ends because of what she did, if that's what made the difference," he stopped. Started again. "Tell me honestly, Emily, does settling mean what happened is real? Legally real?" "It means the company is paying because they know what happened is real," Emily said. "Even if they don't say it out loud, the check they write is the admission." Luis was quiet for a long time. "Then okay," he said. "I trust you." Those 3 words landed on Emily with a weight she hadn't anticipated. She sat with them for a moment before responding. "I won't waste that," she said. Corey was last. He was between classes at the college. She could hear campus sounds behind him, the particular ambient noise of a place where young people were moving toward futures they hadn't ruined yet. He listened to everything she said, and then was quiet in the thoughtful way he'd had since the Sunday dinner. Since something had shifted in him and he'd stopped holding himself like someone who expected to be hit. "Will my visa situation be okay?" he said. "Sandra's colleague has been advising on that specifically. The plan is to structure the settlement in a way that doesn't trigger any complications with your status. And Corey's job at the diner, if he wants it, that's negotiable." A pause. "I don't think I want to go back," he said. "Not because I'm scared. Because I think I want to finish my degree and do something with it, and the diner was always supposed to be temporary." He paused again. "Is that okay? Does it hurt the others if I don't want to go back?" "It doesn't hurt anyone," Emily said. "You fought this. That's what you owe. Where you work after isn't part of the debt." "You sound like Jackson," Corey said. Emily almost smiled. "I've been listening to him. He coming back?" "He said the road comes back through sometimes." "That's not a real answer." "No," Emily agreed. "It isn't." She called Sandra at 8 the next morning. She had been awake since 5. which was becoming a habit she didn't love but had stopped fighting. "We want mediation," Emily said. "But I need you to push for 4 specific things that aren't about the money. First, written policy reform, not generic, specific. Anti-retaliation procedures, tip pool documentation requirements, third-party HR reporting channels, in writing, enforceable, and applied to this company's locations across the state," Sandra said. "Go on." Second, independent monitoring for 1 year. External HR consultant reviews the Bakersfield location's management conduct quarterly. The company pays for it. Also reasonable, Sandra said. Third, Luis Mendez's position hours and benefits restored in full. Back pay for the tip violations for all 4 of us covering the documented period. And Corey's final semester of college, the company pays for it. He's a student who needed the job to fund his education, and their employee made that education precarious. They pay for it. A pause. "That last one is creative," Sandra said. "I like it." Fourth? Emily took a breath. Donna Reyes gets a formal written apology. From the district manager. Not from legal. Not a form letter. A written acknowledgement that what she experienced was real, that the company failed to protect her, and that her 20 years of service has value. She paused. "I know that's not standard. It's unusual," Sandra said. "I know. It might be the thing they push back hardest on. Corporate counsel hates putting anything in writing that sounds like an admission. Then to make them understand that it's the cheapest thing on the list," Emily said. "A piece of paper costs them nothing except the ego of their legal team. And it means more to Donna than any dollar figure they're going to propose." A long silence on the line. Then Sandra Parks said, with the particular quality she had when she was recalibrating, "Emily, have you considered law school?" Emily blinked. "Pete asked me the same thing." "We're both right. I'm 25 with $40 in savings. That's an excellent reason to settle this case favorably and use the proceeds to apply," Sandra said. "I'll call you when I have a first response from corporate counsel." The response came in 4 days. They agreed to the policy reform. They agreed to the independent monitoring. They agreed to Luis's restoration and the back pay. They proposed a modified version of Corey's tuition, not the full semester but a contribution, which Sandra immediately characterized as an opening position and spent 2 more days negotiating to the full amount. They pushed back hard on Donna's apology. Corporate counsel called it unprecedented and legally inadvisable and sent a counteroffer that was a general statement of the company's commitment to workplace values, which Sandra sent back with a single sentence, "My client found this insufficient. Please try again." Emily, sitting in Sandra's Fresno conference room for the first round of mediation, watched Donna read the company's 3rd attempt at the apology letter and watched Donna's face and knew before Donna said anything what the answer was. "It still sounds like a lawyer wrote it," Donna said. "It did," Sandra confirmed. "Can we make them change it? We can try," Sandra said. "But at some point, we have to weigh what we're holding the rest of the settlement for." Donna folded the letter carefully. She set it on the table. She looked at Emily. "What do you think?" Emily thought about it. She thought about 20 years and a notebook in a purse and a daughter who had told her mother to keep records. She thought about what it actually meant to be seen and whether a document produced under legal duress was capable of being that thing. "I think," Emily said carefully, "that the piece of paper they write is never going to be the real acknowledgement. The real acknowledgement is that they settled, that they looked at your notebook and Luis's recordings and everything we brought, and they decided paying us was better than fighting us. That's the acknowledgement." She paused. "The letter is just paper. What happened to you is something that 4 people went on record to corroborate. That's real in a way no letter can be or take away." Donna looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through her face. Something that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite relief, but lived in the same neighborhood as both of them. "Okay," she said. "Okay, then tell them the letter is fine." Sandra made a note. The mediation concluded in full 2 days later. The settlement amount was under non-disclosure, but it was real enough that when Emily transferred the numbers in her head, she had to sit with them for a minute. because she had been existing in the mathematics of a $40 and a bus pass for so long that different numbers felt like a foreign language she was hearing spoken fluently for the first time. She called her mother that night. Her mother, who lived in Phoenix and who had not known most of what had been happening because Emily had stopped calling with things that scared her mother after the regional visit had gone wrong and she'd had to hear worry without being able to accept comfort. Her mother listened to everything. She was quiet through all of it, in the way that mothers are quiet when they are reconstructing a timeline they weren't given access to. When Emily finished, her mother said, "You should have called me." "I know," Emily said. "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't want you to be scared, and I didn't have any good news to give you yet." A long silence. "Emily Marie Carter," her mother said, with the particular precision of a woman deploying a full name. "The next time something like this happens, I know. Mom, you call me from the first day. You hear me? Yes. I don't care if you don't have good news. I'm your mother. My job is to be scared with you." Emily pressed her lips together hard. "I know," she said. Her voice was doing things she hadn't given it permission to do. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just come visit," Emily said. "I promise soon." She sat for a while after they hung up, in the quiet of her apartment, which felt different than it used to, not larger. The rooms were the same size, but something about how she occupied it had changed. She had been living in this apartment like a person who was temporarily stopped, waiting for the thing that would allow her to move again. She had not understood that moving was something she could do without waiting for permission. She was beginning to understand it now. 3 weeks after the settlement, Daniel Okafor called Emily directly. She was on the bus when his number came up, the district manager's number, which she had saved 6 weeks ago for reasons she hadn't fully articulated to herself at the time. She picked up. "Miss Carter," Okafor said, "I apologize for calling without warning. I got your number from Maria Perez, who suggested I might benefit from speaking with you directly." Emily watched the streets of Bakersfield go by through the bus window. "What can I do for you, Mr. Okafor?" "I'm in the process of identifying a permanent manager for the Bakersfield location. Greta is temporary, she knows that. It was always the arrangement." A pause. "I've been reviewing the employee records from the last 18 months, and separately, I've been talking to the staff, still at the location. Your name comes up frequently." Emily was very still on the bus. "In what context?" "In the context of someone they trust. Someone who understood what was happening and chose to do something about it in a way that protected everyone, not just herself." Okafor paused. "Maria tells me you have 11 months of experience on that floor and that you understand its operations in a way that would take a new hire a year to replicate. She also tells me you have the respect of the kitchen staff, which in her experience is the harder thing to earn." He paused again. "I'd like to meet with you. Not to offer you something specific, just to talk." Emily looked out the window. She thought about the conversation she'd had with Jackson in the parking lot of her apartment building, that one about a fight for after this one, about what happened to a building after a bad manager left, about whether it just became the same thing with a different name, about what it would take to make it feel different. She had told Jackson that was a fight for after. This was after. "Mr. Okafor," she said, "I'll meet with you, but I want Maria Perez in that meeting." A pause. "That's an unusual request. It's a reasonable one. She built what that diner was before it became what it became. If we're talking about what it should be going forward, she should be in the room." A longer pause then. "Friday morning, 10 o'clock. I'll call Maria." "I'll be there," Emily said. She put her phone in her pocket. The bus moved through the morning. She thought about what she was about to do and whether she was ready for it, and arrived at the same answer she had arrived at in Sandra's office and in her own kitchen and on the back of Jackson's motorcycle on the 99. She wasn't ready. She was going to do it anyway. She pulled out her phone and texted Jackson. "Something's happening. You should know." He responded in 3 minutes, which was fast for him. "Tell me." She typed it out. "Okafor. The meeting, Maria Perez. The management position that wasn't offered yet, but was going to be." She sent it and watched the 3 dots appear and disappear and appear again, which she had learned meant inamping, and then reconsidering, which meant whatever he was going to say actually mattered to him. His response came, "You know what you're walking into." She typed back, "Yes, you know it's not going to be easy. Yes, you know it's the right thing." She smiled at her phone on the bus, in a way that was slightly embarrassing, given that she was in public, and typed back, "Stop asking questions you already know the answers to." A longer pause. Then, "Proud of you." She sat with that. 2 words from a man who did not distribute them carelessly. She let them land the way they deserved to land, fully, without immediately deflecting them. "Thank you," she typed, "for the coffee that first morning. For staying." His response took 4 minutes. Long enough that she had almost put her phone away. "Then thank Pete. He drove 2 hours." She laughed out loud on the bus. A woman across the aisle looked at her. Emily did not explain. The Friday meeting lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes, and at the end of it, Daniel Okafor offered Emily Carter the position of general manager of the Sunrise Family Restaurant, Bakersfield, California. She asked for 48 hours to think about it. She did not need 48 hours. She knew what she was going to say before she left the room. But she had learned from the past 2 months that decisions made in the heat of the moment, without the discipline of sitting with them, were decisions you couldn't fully own afterward. She wanted to own this one completely. She spent the 48 hours doing things that helped her think. She walked. She called Donna, who said, "Emily, if you say no, I will personally lose my mind." She called Louis, who said his daughter wanted to know if the new manager would need a good paralegal someday. She called Corey, who was in the middle of a study session, and said, "Wait, seriously. And then you have to say yes. Who else is going to do it right?" She called her mother, who said simply, "It's what you were always supposed to be doing." And she thought about a woman who had spent 11 months believing a voice in her head that sounded like Travis Miller. About a notebook she had filled because she had never quite stopped believing that evidence mattered. About a man on a motorcycle who had looked at her, like she was worth looking at, before she knew how to believe that herself. She called Okafor on Sunday morning. Yes, she said. Her first week as general manager, Emily Carter did 3 things. She met with every member of staff individually, not as an evaluation, but as a conversation. She asked each person what they needed to feel safe in the building and what they needed to do their best work. And she wrote down what they said, and she acted on it. She reinstated Louis's full hours, and she adjusted Corey's schedule around his class times without being asked. She created a tip documentation system, clear, written, auditable, and she explained it to every server on the floor and made sure they understood they had the right to question it. The second thing she did was hang a small whiteboard in the staff room. At the top, in her handwriting, it said, "If something happens that doesn't feel right, this is who you call." Below it were 3 names and numbers, the new HR reporting line, Sandra Park's direct number at Nichols and Park, and Pete Dolan's cell. The third thing she did was call Maria Perez and invite her to lunch. They sat in the diner, in Emily's diner now, which was a thought that still felt foreign and very large, and Maria ordered the soup and said it tasted the way she remembered, and Emily said that was because she had gone back to the original recipe that the previous kitchen manager had used before Travis had changed it. Maria set down her spoon and looked at Emily across the table with the particular expression of someone who understands what a gesture actually means. "How does it feel?" Maria said. "Enormous," Emily said, "and a little terrifying." "And right. That's how it should feel," Maria said. "That's how I felt for the first 3 years." She paused. "You have good instincts, Emily. Better than you know. I'm learning to trust them." "Good." Maria picked up her spoon again. "Jackson called me. You know, before he left. He wanted to make sure I was going to follow through on the Okafor meeting." Emily looked at her. "He called you?" 2 days before the meeting. He said, "Maria, make sure that girl gets what she's earned." Those were his exact words. Maria's eyes had something warm and slightly complicated in them. "He didn't call to check on the case. He called to check on you." Emily pressed her lips together. She looked at the counter, the same counter, where she had stood 11 months ago with her shoulders pulled in tight, counting the seconds until the kitchen door stopped being a thing she had to brace for. The same counter where she had whispered to a man she didn't know yet words that had started everything. She was behind it now, on the other side. "He's coming back through Bakersfield in 3 weeks," she said. "He texted me the route. Is he now?" Maria said. "He's riding up from Kingman. Same road as the first time." Emily looked at her. "I told him Sunday dinners are a standing invitation." Maria smiled. "He'll be hungry." "He's always hungry," Emily said. "He just doesn't admit it." Jackson Hayes rolled into Bakersfield on a Thursday afternoon. 3 weeks later, on the same highway he had ridden in on 7 weeks before. Same desert, same light, same quality of sky that looked excessive in its clarity, like a sky that was trying too hard. He pulled into the lot of the Sunrise Family Restaurant at 4:15 and killed the engine and sat for a moment the way he always did, listening to the silence after the rumble, feeling the stillness after the motion. He was 51 years old and his back still gave him grief on long rides, and he was entirely at peace with that. He pushed through the door. The diner was different. Not physically different, the same booths, the same counter, the same faded painting of the sun on the sign outside. But different in the way that rooms are different when the people in them are different. Donna was working the back section and she moved through it with an ease she hadn't had 7 weeks ago, not faster, just easier. The difference between someone navigating a minefield and someone walking through a familiar room. Luisa's voice came from the kitchen, talking to someone, and it was a talking voice, not a careful voice. The register of someone who is not monitoring the door. Jackson took his booth near the window. A young server, not Corey, someone new, came over with a coffee pot and a menu and the relaxed professional warmth of someone working in a place that felt like it was going somewhere. "Just coffee," Jackson said. "Sure thing," she poured. "You just ride in from Kingman." "Long ride. I'm used to it." She left the pot and went about her section. Jackson wrapped his hands around the mug and looked at the counter. Emily came through the door from the back at 4:22. She was in different clothes than he'd ever seen her in, not the uniform, not the jeans and sweatshirt from the apartment nights, but something in between. She had a clipboard. She looked like a person who belonged somewhere and knew it. She saw him. She did not perform the seeing of him, no big reaction, no theatrical moment. Just a real smile, the kind he had watched evolve over 7 weeks from so smile, not to something that lived entirely in the category of genuine. And she crossed the dining room and sat down across from him like she'd been doing it for years. "How was Kingman?" she said. "Hot. It's always hot." "I know." He looked at her, at the clipboard, at the way she held herself in the chair. "You look different." "I'm the manager, I know." "You look different from that too." She considered that. "I think I believe things I didn't believe before," she said, "about myself. That's probably what looks different." "Probably," he agreed. They sat with that for a moment, comfortable, in the way that people are comfortable when they have been through something together that didn't have a name for the experience except the experience itself. "Donna's good," Emily said. "I can see that." Luisa's daughter got into a summer law program at Berkeley. She starts in June. Terrifying kid, in the best way. Emily set the clipboard on the table. Corey finished his semester. He's applying for an environmental engineering internship in San Diego. He called me last week to say he thought he was going to be okay. He is going to be okay. Yes. She looked at her clipboard. Pete called me about law school again. Jackson said nothing. Sandra Park's firm has a scholarship program for non-traditional applicants. Pete talked to Sandra. Sandra talked to me. She looked up. I'm 30 credits short of the prerequisites. I could take them at the community college here while I run the location. In 2 years, I could apply. Are you asking for my opinion? No, she said. I'm telling you what I'm doing. He held her gaze. Good, he said. The diner moved around them, the door opening and closing. The sound of dishes. Donna's voice carrying from the back section with the ease of someone who had found her footing again. The ordinary, specific, irreplaceable sound of people working in a place that felt like it was worth working in. Stay for Sunday dinner, Emily said. Ray's coming. And Anna is bringing tamales, and Pete is driving from Fresno just for the tamales, which he denies, but everyone knows. I'll stay through Sunday, Jackson said. And after that? He looked at her steadily. At this woman who had kept a notebook for 11 months, because she had never completely stopped believing that truth had weight, who had sat on the floor of her kitchen and said, I'm not ready, I'm just going to do it anyway, and then done it, who was sitting across from him now in a diner she ran, talking about law school like it was something that was going to happen, because she had decided it was, and it was. After Sunday, he said, I'll ride north. There's a chapter in Modesto I've been meaning to visit, and the coast road past Carmel is something I haven't done in a while. He paused, and sometime after that, the road will come back through Bakersfield. Emily picked up her clipboard. She stood up. She looked at him one more time with the expression she had settled into over the past weeks, clear and steady and grounded. The expression of a person who has learned the difference between waiting for permission and deciding. The coffee's better before 9, she said. I know, he said. I've been told. She smiled and went back to work. Jackson held his mug and looked out the window at the desert light, doing what it did this time of day, turning everything the color of something that was not quite fire and not quite gold but lived somewhere in between. The kind of light that could make a forgotten roadside diner look like the most important building in the world. He had ridden through it enough times to know it was just physics. He had also ridden through it enough times to know that sometimes physics and meaning arrived at the same address. He drank his coffee. In the kitchen, Luis Mendez was teaching the new prep cook the original soup recipe, the one from before Travis, the one that tasted like the place used to be. He narrated it the way he narrated everything, with the patient precision of someone who believed that doing things right was worth the extra minutes. In the back section, Donna Reyes moved through her tables with the unhurried competence of a woman who had spent 20 years in this building and had finally stopped apologizing for it. In the manager's office, Emily Carter had her laptop open and a yellow legal pad beside it and a community college course catalog bookmarked in a browser tab, and she was drafting next week's schedule with the focused efficiency of someone who had too much to do and had made peace with that. Outside, Bakersfield went on the way it always went, the buses running, the desert light traveling at the speed of physics, across the same roads it had always crossed, falling on the same buildings and parking lots, and the same old sign with its faded sun that looked now, in this particular afternoon light, less like a cracked egg yolk and more like something rising. The door of the diner opened. New customers. Donna looked up. She smiled, the real one. This was not the end of something. This was the shape that a beginning makes when it has finally found solid ground. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone to tell them they are worth fighting for. Emily Carter had been one of those people. She had waited 25 years in the specific patient way of someone who has not yet understood that the waiting is optional. She understood now. And the woman who understood it was running the building that had once made her afraid, building a future on the evidence she had never stopped collecting. In a town she had almost left but hadn't, because sometimes the place that tested you hardest is also the place that needs you most. That was the whole truth of it. Clean, real, and permanent. She was not the girl who cried behind the counter anymore. She was the reason no one else would have to.